Okay, kids, we're officially live, and it is another episode of Gearbox 2.0. I do not know if the technology gods are with me today. Travis is saying, hey. Hey, Travis. Um, we'll start with the fact that last week was categorically probably the biggest cluster in terms of technology problems I have ever had with YouTube or live streaming or anything like that. Today, the connection seems okay. It doesn't seem amazing. Hopefully, the audio's okay. Hopefully, you guys can see me. Hopefully, I'm not too max headroom for the people who know what that is. Let me know, and we will get into this week. It's going to probably be about a half-hour episode today. We have the, what's up, Bart? The reboot of episode 29 of Camera and Flask coming up today at 3 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And myself, Ben Barden, and Caleb Pike will be doing the $3,500 used gear challenge from B&H. So it should be a fun one. Oh boy, Ben. Oh, it's starting already. So here we are, and so just to make matters worse, to take a wound and just rub salt into it, my my website's email my email's been down on and off for the last 24 hours, so it just seems to keep going. But here we are in the barn, and I'm feeling relatively confident, but not totally. And we'll just kind of get into today's episode. And I just want to get back to some gear. Maybe we'll do some more business stuff in the near future. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully you can see me. And what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about this little guy right here and sort of how I've been building out the C200 as a rig. It's been a long evolution. There's still probably one or two more parts that are coming in. And then to have a conversation here on the chat with general gear questions that you might have. Again, probably go for about half an hour today. Lots happening. AV is good. Thank you, Travis. So there you go. So again, welcome to Gearbox 2.0. And I am getting into the habit here of doing these live streams. And it's kind of well, I don't know if I'd say it's a double-edged sword. It's really out of necessity right now. It is getting to be that time of year. My oldest daughter is about to graduate from high school, commencement, in-laws. You may have heard about some of that stuff. Possibly my dog is pregnant. I hope not. There's all kinds of things going on. But here I am in the barn, and it's quiet in here. And I'm happy to have everybody who has shown up. So let's just get right into gear. I'll keep checking the chat here if there are any questions. And again, don't forget that we have Camera and Flask today at 6 p.m. Eastern with our $3,500 used gear challenge. Just check the, this channel, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Though all of the people here probably are subscribed. So C200 and some of the things I want to talk about here are sort of the evolution of this rig. I've been trying to get this rig to the point where I feel like I can use it on a kind of daily basis. My dog is pregnant. Sounds like there's no, yeah, there is a country song in there. So basically what I want to do is just take you through what this rig is and the reason that I built it out this way. So last year, my friend Slavik from digitalfilmmaker.net was writing an article on this ZEISS recoil rig number 79, the end-all recoil rig. And he also had these things right here, which are the trigger grips. And this is the part that intrigued me. I already had a Vct Baseplate, and I had the older Recoil Rig system. But this is the new one. I traded all my stuff in and I upgraded because there were enough things about this rig that I liked a lot. Let me just take it off of sticks for a second so you guys can sort of see how this thing is built out for me. First of all, it's incredibly lightweight, and I'm just checking my monitor here on the computer so you guys can see. It's well balanced. The trigger grips basically just have, and I've done an episode on these, they just have these basically releases here. So they're a little bit different than the shape. The shape uses buttons. These have little levers, and you can really get stuff wherever you want it to be. And then what I have is I have essentially a relocator cable, because I have the C200. If you had the C300 Mark II, you'd actually have a relocator like grip unit. So the bottom of the C200 is really irritating to me. Yeah, let's not talk about that wobble. That's a whole other thing that I'm working on right now. Ben can talk about that. But you can sort of see how the rig is. And the biggest challenge that I've had with this rig overall has been monitor placement, because I tend not to be an EVF person. So if you guys can see that here, I'm going to talk about all the parts that I have. But overall, I'm very, very happy with the way the rig is sitting here. I'm happy with the monitor placement. There's some little tweaks here and there that I have to do, but I think that this is essentially where the rig is going to wind up for me. And again, because this camera system is so light, you know, the difference between carrying this around and a lot of other camera systems is pretty huge. Let me actually, that was stupid. Let me lock the pan bar and then get that back on there. So let me go ahead and pan this over here. The first thing that we should talk about is the fact that it's on a Vct baseplate. And hey, Ryan, glad you made it, man. This is sort of the, this is the foundation of everything, because it allows you to take your shoulder mount rig off of here very, very quickly with this release, put it back up on sticks and operate it that way. And then you have the actual recoil rig right here. And I'm just trying to make sure I get enough light on this thing for you guys. So let me just, it's hard doing these ones like that. There you go. So that should help. So you have the recoil rig right here. It's got 15 mil rods, which I may actually put longer ones on here for a map box, which I have. Yes, the bottom of the C200 and C300 and C300 Mark II is really annoying, and it would be nice if there were 3/8 and 1/4 20 screws in other places on the bottom of that. The problem is that it's all in the front, so it has this tendency to wobble unless you just get your camera on your plate in exactly the right place. But the right place isn't always the right place in terms of where you need the plate to be in relationship to whatever you are attaching it to in terms of some sort of base plate. So basically you have this recoil rig, which is a base plate system with a shoulder pad built into it. There's a release on here. One of the things that I do like about this upgraded version is that there are markings here so that you can have repeatability. That's hard to show you right now. I guess I could tilt it and you might be able to see it. But there are markings right here that allow you to, you can't see it, repeat where you are positioning stuff. There is an ARRI rosette on this side, which is really nice if you want to attach something to it. I wish they had put one on this side as well. I don't think it really would have gotten in the way. There are also rod support receptors here on the back. So if you want to fly rods off the back for counterbalance or for a different type of camera system, you can. This is not designed for the C200. It's designed as, I'm going to answer that question in a minute, Bill. This is designed as a universal rig. And then what you'll do is you will build out essentially the grips to support the camera system that you have. So again, because I'm using the C200, I have this cable, which is an extension cable that runs down here, and then that attaches directly to my grip. This grip attaches, because of the way the C200 works, to a rosette, and that's the way it was basically bought. I have a second grip for the right hand, which is literally just a duplicate of this grip right here. And these are called trigger grips because you can adjust them so quickly and easily using these adjustments on the rig. And to me, this is kind of like the king of the castle, these trigger grips. I think I could have just kept my old base plate and recoil rig and everything else. Actually, this is my old VCT tripod plate. But these are the components here. And in fact, if you have a shoulder mounted rig, you could add trigger grips to them and you would get 99% of the functionality of what I like in here. I also have a lens support here. Again, I do have a map box that goes on the front of here if I need it. And what I really love about the Canon system is the BPA60s last for a long, long time. You're getting the same type of hours of usage here that you'd be getting out of a big V-mount or AB gold mount battery system because of the efficiency of the camera. We get to the top. I'm using the stock handle here from Canon. I've got, and I usually use a lot of little cold shoe attachments. So I've got one back here, and that's the one that I'm using for essentially my audio. And it's on a ball mount, 492 LCD from Manfrotto. And that way, if I want to monitor audio and I'm on sticks and I want to put that somewhere else, it's really easy to put it into a different position. But when it's on my shoulder, it's generally just behind me there. In the front, this is a definite Frankenstein. I have a small rig NATO set up here, which I'm just going to see if I can get you guys to see. It's right over here, and that's just a NATO rail, a tiny little one. And then there's a little Zacuto piece here, which goes onto the NATO rail, which terminates in a 15 mil rod. And then to make it even more Frankenstein, I have a wooden camera 15 mil to NATO rod here. And the reason I'm using this one is it's really long and I'm blind-ish. And so I really wanted to make sure I could get this monitor forward. And then the last piece of the puzzle besides the monitor itself is this new piece I got yesterday from SMALLHD, which basically is a NATO to quarter 20 with this ball joint here, which lets you adjust where your monitor is, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. So that's kind of the whole setup there. And then I have my mic over here for just basically scratch audio. And again, then when it goes up onto your shoulder, let me go ahead and lock this down. You can see that incredibly lightweight camera system that sits there. And I have a lot of adjustability in terms of where the monitor is going to go and the positioning of everything inside of the rig. Now, I think I'm going to get a little lens hood. And one of the things that I want to just mention here is why am I not flying a larger monitor on the front of this camera system? And if that was a question you were thinking, which it may or may not be, the answer is basically, oh, and by the way, I love these trigger grips because they just fold right up. So when you put them in a case or you want to shoot on the ground, right now, just because of where I have them, they're not going all the way up, but I can basically just put those straight up. So what the hell was I saying? Oh, the monitor. So the reason that I'm using this monitor is because one of the huge advantages of the C200 is the touch focus capabilities of that LMV1. And so, Brian, that is the stock monitor cable. They do make a 39-inch one, which costs like $325. But because the C200's position of cable to monitor is relatively close to the front of the camera, it's easier to rig this than the C300 Mark II. You'll have a problem with that 20-inch cable on the 20-inch? Is it a 20-inch? I think it is. It might be a 20 centimeter. I don't know. So Canon basically makes two of these ridiculously expensive cables. And basically, the longer one is going to be needed if you want to rig out on the C300 Mark II. But generally on the C200, because your video terminal is here as opposed to back here on the camera system on the C300 Mark II, it's relatively easy to rig that to where you need it to be. So the question, how useful is a shoulder rig in reality? What percentage of your jobs need it? Well, I think the answer to that, Bill, really has a lot to, hey, David, it has a lot to do with your style of shooting or the style of shooting that that project is going to use. For me personally, being on sticks and handheld and on the shoulder are the most common ways that I'm going to shoot. But I haven't actually had, a shoulder rig built out to this camera system yet in a way that I've really liked it. And until you have a rig that's kind of built out the way you want to use it, I think the reality is you don't use it. But when you are shooting, especially with lenses that do not have image stabilization, it's almost critical to be on something like a shoulder-mounted rig, unless your style of shooting is to, handhold like this or like this all of the time. And just having all of those points of contact is absolutely huge. In terms of manually focusing, when you're running and gunning on a rig like this, I would probably say that I'm not unique in the fact that when I'm focusing, you could absolutely get a little Tilta nucleus, follow focus system and somehow have something right here where you could be changing focus. There are times with manual focus lenses where I'll also set up a small follow focus system. There are some from different companies. There's small ones where you could basically just rig it and just grab that so your hand's not on the barrel of the lens. But quite honestly, for me, it's probably going to be just grabbing the barrel of the lens when I'm on a shoulder rig when you're manually focusing and you're not relying upon touch focus or the AF system. So it's also getting that to a position where it is comfortable for you so that you not only are comfortable looking at the monitor itself, and again, these trigger grips allow you to, kind of adjust things to where that sits properly for you, but also where you can grab the lens and you can make changes. And obviously different lenses are going to be different lengths, and the focus wheel or ring of the lens is going to be in a different place. But that's generally how I'm manually focusing, is either grabbing the barrel of the lens or putting a small follow focus system on there. In fact, Wooden Camera now has some inexpensive follow focus solutions. And Zacuto does have an interesting one. It's like a Vornado. I don't quite like the weird thing that you grab with your hand. And you kind of use it as another hand grip, but they do have a little follow focus thing that's kind of interesting and very small in terms of form factor. So basically, this is the overall rig in terms of look and feel. The trick is also when you're building out a camera system like this, you need to make sure that if you're using a shoulder-mounted rig, and you're going between shoulder mounted and sticks, that your fluid head and your tripod system as a whole is rated to balance the system that you're using. Because you can very, very quickly get to the point when you're using a system like this, especially if you're flying a 7-inch monitor, with a couple of batteries on it, where you are going to have a really difficult time balancing that camera system on your fluid head. Now, there are some inexpensive solutions that are out there in the market that you can get. They're not necessarily going to give you the performance you're going to be getting out of a high-end Miller or Sockler system. But if you've got a Manfrotto 509 HD, it's 100 millimeter, it goes up to about 30 pounds, you'd be able to balance a larger configuration than this. But this is sort of about the most that you can go on an up to about a 26-pound system and actually balance the whole thing, because you want to be able to operate the camera up on sticks as well as when you have it on the shoulder. And so that's really important. Obviously your VCT baseplate stays where it is, and then you pop this into place. And then if you've balanced to the lens that you're using in your configuration, then you should be good to go. But that is really important when you're thinking about kind of getting into building out your rig, is making sure that you are matching your tripod system to the camera system that you're using. So, you know, that's probably one of the most important. And like I said, you can get the Manfrotto 509 HD, and on its highest counterbalance setting, you should be able to rig this out with a 5 or 7 inch monitor with a couple of Sony NPF style batteries. Maybe put a little bit more GAC on there, or a slightly heavier lens, and that's basically where, you know, there's a whole center of gravity thing that happens, and how high the camera sits above the actual fluid head that factors in as well. So just because a manufacturer says that a tripod system, primarily the fluid head, has a range and tops out at a certain pound or kilogram amount, kilo amount, yes, doesn't mean that you're going to be able to balance that camera system. You might have something that's 24 pounds in total weight, but because of center of gravity and height and all of those things, you can't get it to perfectly balance on there. I will actually do a follow-up either live or as a recorded episode of Gearbox, where I teach everybody how to balance a camera system in different configurations onto your tripod system and your fluid head. This was just thrown together pretty quickly, so I do have to continue to balance this out. But a lot of it really has to do with the springs inside of that fluid head and making sure that they match up and they do what they're supposed to be doing. Again, a little bit of a Frankenstein here. We've got parts on this rig from ZEISS. Obviously a bongo tie, very important. We've got small rig in a few different places. A couple of no-name cold shoes. ZEISS is kind of the basis of the system. And then again, this wooden camera 15 mil to NATO rod to basically get that monitor further away. And I did actually, previous to this, earlier this week, have a whole small rig system, which was an all-in-oneer, which got this monitor to about here. So it was actually not quite as far back. And that's why I pulled out this other piece I had from Wooden Camera, which the NATO rail was longer. Honestly, I'd like it to be even longer. The other thing that you need to be careful of is, as soon as you start to fly a monitor out in a configuration like this, is when you start to add, do I have it here? I don't think so. No. Well, I can talk about it. This is an 11 to 16, but I have the 17 to 55. And what you have to make sure of is, when that's on the wide end of the lens, that you're not seeing this right edge of your monitor right here in the frame. So the first thing you want to do when you start to rig out is take the widest lens that you're going to be using at the widest focal length, if it's a zoom, and then start to rig this thing out so that you don't see the edge of your monitor and frame at your widest focal length. I've already tested it with this system here, so I'm good to go. But I think, you know, you do have to make sure you make those little adjustments, because you really want that monitor to be sitting right in front of you. You also want the horizon level to be correct, because generally when you have a monitor where the horizon level is off, then what winds up happening is you start to make adjustments to see that image in the way you perceive it as being straight, and then your shots aren't level in terms of horizon. That's a big problem, actually, with the clamshell design that came with the original C300 and C300 Mark II, in the sense that when you rigged that clamshell up, it was constantly tilting or a little bit. And that's the, you know, that's it. So you've never seen a 3-point contact rig for long use at waist level. Well, that's kind of where you start to get into using the EASYRIG, in the sense that you have a point of contact at the top and it's taking pressure off and you can basically hold that camera with a rig like this up against your body. I don't have my EasyRig out right now. It's not an ideal way to kind of talk about this. I think Bill's, making that comment. But when you get into larger rigs like this, it does get difficult in terms of being able to, operate everything, at waist level. But if you think about having this here, and then I'd have to adjust, my handle, I'd probably relocate this grip over here. But basically what I'll do is I'll generally hug this side of my body, and then I have an EasyRig with that attaching right here. And I'd have to reposition my monitor so I was seeing my monitor over here or over here in terms of my shots. And that, that kind of gets into a whole different style of shooting, but you can definitely adapt a shoulder rig system like this to, to that hip style shooting. One of my good friends, Matt Porwall, actually shoots, different ways all of the time. And it is not uncommon for shooters to take a rig like this and to pop it off of sticks and to basically hug the camera a little bit and then take their monitor, and you're basically holding the camera like I just was, and then you have a monitor sitting here, and it's just a different way to do that. Yeah, it's really that. So EasyRig is quite that. Well, if the EasyRig MINIMAX is not that expensive. Oh, there you go. Ryan's in there with me. We're thinking alone. I mean, alone and alike, maybe, or mind melding. So yeah, I mean, the little MINIMAX is probably your best bet, and will for sure handle a camera system like this. Where you start to get into trouble is when you start to get into bigger rigs. So if you're looking in the low end in terms of price point for a camera system, the place that you're going to run into some issues is when you start to take something like the Ursa Mini Pro 4.6K. It's a big camera system, and you start to rig that out. Then you could have a problem with an EasyRig MINIMAX, and you'll have to go to a higher end model. There are some other companies that are making products like the EasyRig. For my money, I'd probably go with EasyRig. I wish I had the new, it's not that new anymore, quick attachment system for mine, because mine basically just grabs onto the handle of the rig itself. And the new one is like this ball mount that just pops into place. It has a quick release. Even more stable, and I'm hoping there's an option for me, because I don't have a MINIMAX, I have the original Mini. I bought mine used for, I'm going to say $700 or $800, but I bought it a couple of years ago. So there may be some options for you to buy an EasyRig like that. And Brian has used an off-brand EasyRig, and it's complete trash. So there you go. Some real world experience there. So what other production questions do you guys have? Because I'm just going to go for a couple more minutes, I think, today, because there's so much stuff going on. And we do have the Camera and Flask episode coming up, but I do want to make sure I can get in some general production questions for everybody. Are there any other legit brands of EasyRig type thing? Ryan, not that I know of. That doesn't mean that there aren't. But for me personally, I'm not aware of a brand that I would say, oh yeah, there's an alternative, which of course you can when we get into things like tripod systems and other types of support systems. Some people will prefer a Ronin, and some people will prefer a Movi. So it really just depends on experience and what you guys are doing and all of that fun stuff. I'm just going in right now to grab the link for our Camera and Flask episode, which I'm going to post right here in the chat. And there we go. Hey, unrelated. From Metcalf Media. Is the diffusion in the 5-in-1 trash? Should I be using WESTCOTT frame with their diffusion instead? That's a great question. Can you guys just wait for about 30 seconds? I'm going to go grab that and show it to you, and we'll talk about the pluses and the minuses. Hold on, I know where it is. Hopefully you can still hear me. And just give me 1 second. I am going off into the world to go. There it is. Hopefully the wireless Go is working. It may lose its connection. Coming back. If I dropped out, I'd like to know, because that would be interesting on these wireless Go mics. And Fig Rig, I still have one. All right, what's your experience with Tiffin diffusion filters? Tiffin makes great filters. Here we go. So this is essentially a 5-in-1, and I'm going to open this up to the center part. And what you're basically getting here is, from what I can tell, about a one-stop diffuser. Okay, so just equivalent to another, no drops. That's great to hear. So that's going to work, but remember, it's just one stop. So if you're going inside and you're lighting an interview and you want to push some light through it, that's fine. If you're going outside and you just want to soften up that sunlight, that's okay. But generally, you're going to want more diffusion when you are softening up and modifying a light source. So for instance, you know, that big honkin' softbox that I'm using right now from DOP Choice is about a 3x4. It's using Magic Cloth, which I'd say Magic Cloth is probably at least 2, maybe 2+ stops, 2.5 maybe. I'd have to look that up in terms of light loss, but also much softer and wrapped and beautiful. And I use half grid cloth a lot. Half grid cloth is not a half a stop. It's more like 1.5, 1.6 stops of diffusion. So I say I'm usually leaning towards like 1.5 to 2.5 stops of diffusion when I'm using that. So the advantage of going with the frame and using basically silks and other rags is that you can get basically lots of choices in terms of what you're using. You can, of course, just buy rolls of diffusion as well, 216, 251, you know, Hampshire Frost, you know, all of the different ones that are going to give you lots of different looks and feels. But generally buying a frame of some sort that gives you options to buy different types of diffusion fabrics is the way to go. The disadvantage, of course, is that if you're just doing a single frame, then in certain situations, you're going to have to flag a lot of light, which is where a softbox comes in handy. So again, I'm using a softbox here in this space because it's a relatively small fake studio that was built. And there you go. Hold on. A hook from out of nowhere to hang stuff from. Yeah. So what other questions do we have for a couple of minutes here? So I can answer anything else that you have about the rig or anything else. Yeah. So you can just do a T-bar for stuff too and hang stuff. That's another great point. You know, one of the tricks of the trade is to travel with less tubes, but still bring your fabric and then just hang it from the top. And what's really nice about the WESTCOTT system is the WESTCOTT system is Velcro. So what you can do is you can T-bar it. Basically, you just put the stand there, and then you have your bars or your tubes, and then you can just take the top part of your diffusion panel, a 4x4, a 4x6, 6x6, and you can basically just T-bar that. So that's a good way to do that. Clay asks, what's a good starting point for determining how much you should spend on the rig? Well, I will say this, Clay. We start getting into that same conversation that exists when it comes to tripod systems. All of us, for the most part, are going to go through a trial and error and a process of buying less expensive tripod systems as we go on in our career. And one of the things that you start to realize at a certain point in time is that the functionality that you're getting of how much of a shot you can use when it comes to a good fluid head as opposed to a cheap one, and the longevity of how well that's going to work in different shooting conditions is enormous. And there's sort of this break point right now, within reason, where you sort of have to spend at least $1,000 to get into something that's going to have some longevity and performance that you're going to be using in your work that is going to be worthwhile. And when you start to get into slightly larger systems where you have bigger rigs, you're really starting to look in that $2,000 to $3,500 price range for a complete system, upwards of $4,000. But for something that if you really figure out how you are going to be shooting in different ways with different camera systems, are probably going to have for the next 20 years of your life. So if you compare that to the investment that you're making in a camera system every 3 to 4 years, it's actually relatively low. And if you shoot with a tripod system a lot, which most of us do and should be, then it can be a very worthwhile investment. Then you start to talk about a rig. And when you start to talk about a rig, a lot of it has to do with how much are you relying upon that gear for what you're doing. You can absolutely go onto Amazon now and you can build out a rig that is somewhat similar to this, using small rig parts. You're not necessarily going to get the same functionality in terms of those trigger grips or what Shape does with their button adjustments. Maybe that will come soon. Maybe there's already manufacturers who have that. I think your investment in a rig like this really depends on what you're doing. But the beauty is that you can Frankenstein. So if you find that there's a small rig component here that goes up on your shoulder, and their VCT baseplate, for your tripod works well, then maybe what you're going to do is get those for less money, and then you're going to make an investment into something like the Zacuto trigger grips to add that functionality to your system. So that's kind of the beauty of what we have right now, is that we can do that. Flowtech legs are great. They're very fast and adjustable. I have the Sprinter ones here from Miller, which have both stages in one place. Not all sitting at the top all the time, which is, I think, the big advantage of the Flowtechs. And the Socklers, I mean, you talk about Video 18s, you talk about the Compass line, different high-end ones, but you can really get some great stuff out there. And so Brian saying Vinton or Sockler, I have never been drawn to Vinton fluid heads. I don't personally like the way they feel, and I definitely lean more towards Miller and Sockler in terms of the stuff that I'm using. So Chris, tripod buyer's guide: light, cheap, sturdy, pick two. Yeah, and maybe reliable, long-term reliability. Good. Do I use a lot of egg crates with my soft boxes? I do, depending on the situation. If I don't want that light to really just sort of spread, which I actually prefer. I like a big catch light, and I like it to feel very single sourcey. Then, I don't. But if I'm in a confined space and I really need that light to go into one particular place, I will use an egg crate. The problem with egg crates is that they suck up a lot of light. So they're not just directing the light, but because of the way they're designed and because they are black on the insides, they suck up a lot of light, which is kind of what they're supposed to do. I'd like to see a graduated egg crate where maybe for the first third it's darker, just to make sure that we're getting, the directionality. But it's actually those little, squares that are helping direct the light in a particular direction. So why not start to play with lining some of those with white or silver or combinations of both? Maybe somebody's doing it. I haven't seen it yet, but I think about these things. And Miller Solo they're great sticks. The biggest problem I have with the 75 millimeter version of the Miller Solo is in the first opening of that, when you're opening up the sticks, it's a little too skinny for me, and I don't love that. It may be different on the 100, But yeah, dark tinted egg crate. It might happen. WESTCOTT, CineFlex, or light matte. So essentially very similar in terms of functionality, in terms of what they do. I really only have experience with the flex lights from WESTCOTT. So I don't have a lot of, almost no real world experience with light mats. So I don't know in terms of their reliability what they're like. They're supposed to be color accurate, and they have a lot of different options available to people. But again, I've just been sort of in the whole Flex family of products for so long that that's what my kit consists of. And I can speak to that in terms of reliability, quality of light and all of that kind of stuff. Manfrotto CF legs on Sockler have been great. Yes, I mean, you can take the Manfrotto 536 carbon fiber sticks, reasonably priced, 100 millimeter bowl that you can adapt to 75. And those 536 sticks they're in the other room over. No, they're right there. And you could absolutely take a 100 mil head from a different manufacturer, Sockler or Miller, and put it onto Manfrotto sticks. Impact will have that model coming soon, I'm sure. Yeah, they might. Dark tinted egg crate. We'll see what happens. So any other questions before I start to wrap this up? Again, there's the link to today's Camera and Flask with myself, Ben Barden, and Caleb Pike. We're doing fun stuff. It's our reboot, our redo of last week's technical nightmare, where we are going to finally get into our $3,500 used camera rigs. Hopefully all of my technical issues in general are going to go away very soon, because my email hasn't been working as well. I think that's it for this week. Next week, I'm going to decide if it's going to be a live stream again or if it's going to be a recorded episode. Please let me know if you like the live streams, if you get something out of them, if it's worth me doing those instead. I'd like to know in-laws are not gone. Not for a long time, Chris. So it's going to be a while. Oldest daughter's commencement's this weekend. So now not only are my in-laws here, but tomorrow my brother-in-law and his family are coming in. So there you go. You're welcome, Ryan. You're welcome, Fancy Pants Revolution. Good. Okay, so maybe we'll continue with the live streams. We'll see how this goes. I'd love it if you guys gave me some recommendations for topics. Go to the c47.com/contact, and I will see hopefully some or all of you later on Camera and Flask. And thank you very much for watching.